All right, well, I started off looking into him. I knew there's a couple of us where it's like we'll meet up and there's different bits of like 69th Company A trivia that we wind up doing. You know, it's like who commanded the regiment, who commanded the brigade, who was the commander of Company A, who was the first sergeant. And they'd mentioned something, okay, first sergeant, Joseph Hoban, he was the first sergeant of Company A. He deserted after the Battle of Gettysburg, which that kind of took me a little bit by surprise. Didn't really think much about it. I had my own opinions about it, but then some things kind of changed. You were walking around the battlefield earlier this weekend. I know for people who've been here, I mean, obviously, yes, the casualty rates were atrocious all through the war. The 69th left New York in October of '61 with 1,000 guys. By the time the Battle of Gettysburg rolls around in July of 1863, they had 75 guys. That's a very high attrition rate. And I kind of, just doing some of my own stuff, got a full roster for everybody who served in the 69th during the Civil War. And I just kind of wanted to go through, all right, who were these 75 guys? And it turned out there was more than 75. There was, who was convalescing after Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. So they were still on the books, but probably not at Gettysburg. Or who's on detached service or attached to something else. And one of the things that I was going through, because everything's alphabetical, and I see when Joseph Hoban enlisted, he enlisted in Company G. I was like, all right, transfers, whatever. He was mustered in as sergeant and immediately promoted to first sergeant. So to me, that tells me he's literate. I mean, besides like some charisma and leadership qualities, but he's definitely literate because the first sergeant, you had to do reports. There's a lot of paperwork. You need to be at least able to read and write. But one of the things is I noticed going through, when he enlisted in Company G, 2 days later, when he enlisted, he was 21 years old. 2 days later, Patrick Hoban enlists, and he's 42. You kind of put two and two together doing your own bits of detective work. That's probably his father. And there were cases with fathers and sons and family members enlisting together. But Patrick enlisted 2 days later. So it's either he had said that he was going to enlist, and maybe if mom is still alive, basically says to her husband, "You go keep an eye on him, please." There's another bit which I'm trying to figure out as far as getting a copy of his enlistment forms, because I don't think they were from New York originally. I think they were from Baltimore. So after hearing about Thomas Francis Meagher and his speeches, he went up, and this is the guy I want to fight with. Dad came up a couple days later, and he's also mustered into Company G. So they fight alongside each other, all through the 7 days campaign. And Dad was a private, so he's on the line, firing the first sergeants, echoing commands, making sure everybody's feet are in the right position when, they're firing. The Battle of Antietam rolls around, and Patrick is killed. His father's killed. So most likely, as you know, the first sergeant, you're watching everybody, making sure their feet, making sure their dress is aligned, and he probably saw his dad go down. If he didn't, one of his jobs is to call the roll after they've retired from the field. So he knew then. Probably had to write his mom, let her know. He still stays in, goes into the Battle of Fredericksburg. Company A and Company D, they're deployed off to the side as skirmishers, so they don't get to hit the stone wall. Company G did. He makes it through Fredericksburg without a scratch, and he's, again, as the first sergeant, watching everybody out there. You got to make sure they're aligned, keep your feet in the right position, dress, move forward, double quick, get up on that, get up to that wall. So he's watching. You've developed relationships with these people, the guys you're fighting alongside, over the course of. By the time Fredericksburg rolls around, he's been in a little over a year. And the Irish Brigade, they took close to 90% casualties hitting that wall. So he's losing a lot of friends. And eventually that does have to kind of affect your mind. Battle of Chancellorsville rolls around. Irish Brigade not very heavily engaged, so not a lot of casualties there, but the brigade more or less ceased to be after Fredericksburg anyway. General Marr basically resigns, sends a letter to Lincoln, says, "Well, the Irish Brigade doesn't exist. It's not a brigade. I'm a brigadier general, and I don't have enough people to maintain my rank. So I'm going to, resign my commission." Handed everything off to Patrick Kelly, who was the commander of the 88th. And when they start taking, I guess, inventory of who all we have enlisted and officers, they consolidated the 69th into two companies, Company A and Company B. Any NCOs or officers who were left over with this consolidation, because you don't need that many, you need captain and a couple of lieutenants. Their supernumerary, they're mustered out. You can go home. The war is over. You've done your part. Well, Joseph Hoban probably was one of the last ones to be mustered in as first sergeant, so seniority does count. Sorry, you're staying. Stays through the Gettysburg campaign, stays through the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, the 69th being the 69th, and I know I don't have to tell you this, there was a little controversy at the end of the battle. The regiment was commanded by a captain. Again, they had 75 effectives, maybe 125 altogether. So the captain was a guy named Peter Maroney. Captain Maroney is wounded in the wheat field, carried off. The 69th is now, command devolves down to one of two lieutenants, the lieutenant commanding Company A, lieutenant commanding Company B. It was Lieutenant Smith and Lieutenant O'Neill, who happened to not like each other. The wheat field's just complete and total confusion. When the Irish Brigade retreated, some guys wound up different spots. O'Neill puts charges against Smith for deserting his colors in the face of the enemy. Smith goes back, well, I couldn't desert the colors, they were with me. I don't know where you were. At this point, it's like the infighting got pretty bad. And Meade is pursuing Lee. He's not pursuing him very quickly, but he's still pursuing. There is a saying, people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. You've got two lieutenants, they're fighting with each other, there's charges, counter charges. A lot of this had to weigh on First Sergeant Holband's shoulders. On top of, let's see, I've watched my father get killed. I've watched how many people, my friends die. Why are we doing the attacking stone walls? It's just a complete, waste of, human life. My opinion, that and you start throwing in toxic leadership, I think he just had enough. July 10th, and he wasn't alone when he deserted. He was with two other soldiers who both started in Company G. So these guys were all probably part of the same mess. It's like taking care of, all right, who's on coffee, who's, frying up the salt pork. Great, we've got hardtack. I think when he got to Maryland, and just with everything going on, he just goes, screw this. I'm done. I've had enough. The three of them deserted in Maryland. There's no record of them being, deserted and returned to regiment. They were just deserted. I kind of got the feeling where I think I understand. I get why. It had nothing to do with him being a coward. Maybe PTS had something to do with it. And I think, again, toxic management.
What does this tell us about leadership as a whole, and also should we be looking at his service different because of the desertion?
When you look at the totality of the circumstances, yeah. He served honorably all through the 7 days at Antietam, at Fredericksburg, at Chancellorsville, and at Gettysburg. That's 5 major campaigns. More if you count the 7 days each as a different battle. I ain't good at math. But I mean, to me, it's kind of like a human side of things, especially where it's like when you see, it's like people coming back from some type of traumatic experience and how it's like it's changed them. I hope, in my mind, it's like I hope he had his happily ever after this. It's like mom was still there, nice home cooked meal. Maybe he found himself a nice hot farmer's daughter and had 15 kids. But it's like I hope he didn't become a statistic where it's like guys climbing into a bottle and not crawling out. That's not a new phenomenon. But it's like I hope he had his happily ever after.
And before I let you go, that was a great story. I got to ask you another story. I know that you are in law enforcement at a very large international airport. You've also been reenacting for several years and have actually partaken in some big movies. Can you talk about an incident with Stephen Lang?
Yeah, I can do that. Stephen Lang was returning from someplace outside of the United States, and he, when you leave, you have to present yourself to an officer who works for my agency, who determines whether or not, okay, yes, you're returning U.S. citizen, you're admissible, you're coming here as a visitor for this, you're admissible, you're inadmissible. Who might be smuggling drugs, who might be, trying to evade duties and other things. But he came through. He wasn't on my line, but he was on the line of a guy like right next to me. And at the time, I can't remember the name of the TV show. It was something with like dinosaurs and other galaxies. It was a good show. I actually was kind of upset when it was canceled. And the guy who was on the line next to me was just like, he's somebody. I know he's somebody. He's talking to him, and I can see he's kind of, all excited. And I just kind of look and go, oh, it's Stephen Lang. So, I mean, he saw that I was, looking at him, and he just goes, oh, it's like, okay, I guess you wanted to say. So at this point, I just, come to attention, snap, Civil War salute, just go, welcome home, General. And he returns the salute. He's like, oh, welcome home. Which movie? I was like, Gods and Generals, but I wasn't under your command. I was wearing Union blue, so I was going up against you. He comes over, shakes my hand, and it was like, kind of like greeting a long-lost friend or relatives. Like, oh, you were Gods. He goes, yeah, we had a lot of fun filming that, and it's like, yeah, we did a lot of great things. For those of you who have seen the movie Gods and Generals, the movie was excellent. The movie that came out, not so much. It was murdered in editing. We did do Antietam stuff. But as he's, we're going back and forth, it's just like, all right, nice meeting you, nice talking to you. He's like, all right, goodbye, sir. And I just couldn't resist. I'm going to go for it. Salute again. See you in hell, Johnny Reb. He looks at me, returns the salute, goes, I'll see you in hell, Billy Yank, shakes my hand, and just walks off. I got a boss walking past. He was just going, I should probably talk to you about part of that interaction, but do you guys, know each other? And it's like both me and Stephen Lang at the same time. Just, we're family in a fun sort of way. That's... Reenactors, we are different, but we're also all kind of the same. Every unit's got the different style characters and how we enjoy ourselves around a campfire and stuff like that.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show, introducing me to the world of reenacting, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Right, not a problem.